Betrayed, abandoned, left for dead. 12-year-old Lily Monroe lost everything in a single night. Her parents were poisoned, her home was stolen, and the woman meant to protect her, she was the one who ordered her death. Left to perish in the wilderness, Lily had no food, no shelter, only the cold and the certainty that no one was coming to save her. But they underestimated her. She didn't just survive, she uncovered a secret that would change everything. What did she find? And when she returned, was survival enough or would justice finally be served? Dear family, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to support us and stay for this powerful story. Now let's begin. The cold cuts through her like a blade. Lily Monroe jerks awake, her body shivering violently. Her breath comes out in ragged, uneven bursts, fogging in the frigid night air. The damp forest floor beneath her is hard, unforgiving. Dirt clings to her skin, mixing with the dried blood on her arms. Pain. It radiates from her ribs, sharp and unrelenting. She must have landed hard when they threw her out here. Her fingers, stiff with cold, tighten around the pocket watch in her palm. Her father's watch, the only thing she has left. Then, a sound. A twig snaps. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Her breath catches. She is not alone. She presses herself against the rough bark of a tree, forcing herself to be silent. Her heartbeat pounds in her ears, so loud she's afraid they'll hear it. Then a voice, smooth, cold, familiar. Evelyn. She won't last long, she murmurs. Let the wilderness finish what we started. Lily's stomach clenches, not from fear, but from rage. They think she will die here. They think she is weak. Slowly, she unclenches her jaw. Number. Her grip on the pocket watch tightens, the cold metal biting into her skin. She will not be Evelyn's victim. A slow burning heat rises in her chest, pushing back against the cold. The rage, the betrayal, the sheer injustice of it all fuels her like a fire in the dead of night. She forces the words past her cracked lips, barely more than a whisper. I will not die here. A breath, a promise. I will survive. Her fingers curl around the pocket watch, a reminder of who she is and what she has lost. And I will take back what's mine. The cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it a scent, faint, familiar. Lavender. Lily's breath caught. The aching cold of the forest seemed to fade for just a moment. The pounding of her heart, the fear clawing at her throat, it all blurred into something distant, something softer. She could almost hear it. Soft music, laughter, the warmth of a home that no longer existed. The Monroe estate glowed with warmth, standing proud beneath the twilight sky, its grand white columns bathed in the golden light spilling from its windows. Inside, the scent of baked apples and cinnamon curled through the air, mingling with the soft, nostalgic hum of Frank Sinatra's "The Way You Look Tonight," crackling from the old record player in the parlor. The fire in the grand stone hearth flickered, casting dancing shadows against the polished wood floors. In the kitchen, Lily Monroe twirled in her father's arms, her laughter rising like music itself. Her bare feet slid effortlessly across the cool tiles as Daniel Monroe spun her around, dipping her low with a dramatic flourish. "Ah, my little Lily," he said, his deep voice laced with teasing admiration as he pulled her upright again. "You'll be the finest dancer in Charleston one day, better than those stiff folks at the country club." Lily grinned up at him, breathless from laughter. "Better than you?" Daniel gasped, pressing a hand to his chest in mock offense. "Better than me? Impossible." Margaret Monroe, standing at the kitchen counter, shook her head with a knowing smile as she peeled an apple, her hands moving with practiced ease. "Let the girl have her victory, Daniel," she said, her voice warm with affection. "You know she's got more rhythm than you ever had." Daniel threw up his hands in surrender. "Fine, fine. I concede defeat. Just this once." Lily beamed, her heart swelling with pure, unfiltered joy. Margaret set the knife down and wiped her hands on a kitchen towel before turning to her daughter. "Come here, sweetheart," she murmured, opening her arms. Lily ran to her without hesitation, burying herself in the scent of lavender and vanilla, her mother's perfume, comforting and familiar. Margaret stroked her daughter's hair gently, whispering, "Tomorrow we're going to the fair, just like we promised. We'll eat cotton candy until our stomachs hurt, ride the Ferris wheel, and I get to win a prize at the ring toss," Lily interrupted, pulling back just enough to flash a mischievous, confident grin. Margaret chuckled. "Oh, you think so, huh?" "I know so," Lily declared. Daniel laughed, ruffling his daughter's hair. "Well, I hope you pick something good this time. No more of those stuffed animals. We're running out of room in that bedroom of yours." Lily giggled. "Maybe I'll win the biggest one yet, just to prove you wrong." Margaret smiled down at her, her hazel eyes filled with something warm, something deep. Love, yes, but also something else. A quiet kind of contentment. "Then it's a deal." The warmth of the kitchen, the flickering candlelight, the smooth, velvety tones of Sinatra filling the air. Everything about this moment felt safe. That night, after changing into her favorite nightgown, Lily climbed into bed, the soft sheets cool against her skin. The distant hum of music still played downstairs, a lullaby of sorts, familiar and steady. Margaret leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss against her forehead. "Sleep tight, sweetheart." Lily sighed, already drifting into dreams. "Night, Mama. Night, Daddy." She didn't know it would be the last time she'd ever say those words. A heavy, unnatural stillness wrapped around the house, pressing in from every direction. She stirred beneath the covers, blinking against the soft morning light filtering through the curtains. Something felt wrong. Her ears strained for the familiar sounds of home, the distant hum of jazz drifting from her father's study, the gentle clatter of porcelain as her mother sipped her morning tea, the comforting aroma of fresh coffee wafting from the kitchen. But none of it came. Instead, there was nothing. No music, no footsteps, no voices. A small frown creased her forehead as she pushed the blankets aside and sat up. The air was still, thick with an unsettling quiet. The house had never been this quiet before. Even on the rare mornings when she woke up before her parents, there was always something. The murmur of the staff preparing breakfast, the rustle of the newspaper, the distant hum of life moving around her. But today there was only silence. Her bare feet touched the cool wooden floor as she slipped out of bed. Her nightgown swayed softly around her ankles as she padded across the room. She hesitated at the door. Maybe her parents had simply overslept. Maybe her father had forgotten to put on the record player, and her mother was just enjoying a rare morning of peace. The reasoning felt thin, even to her. Still, she shook off the unease curling in her stomach and stepped into the hallway. The house stretched before her, its grandeur now eerily empty. The morning light slanted through the tall windows, casting long golden streaks across the marble floors. Everything was exactly where it had been the night before. The vase of fresh roses on the hallway table, the portrait of her mother smiling softly above the staircase, the grandfather clock ticking in its steady rhythm. And yet, something was missing. She moved slowly toward her parents' bedroom, her fingers grazing the wooden banister as she walked. The closer she got, the heavier the silence became, like an invisible weight pressing down on her chest. The door was slightly ajar. Lily hesitated. She could see just a sliver of the room beyond, the morning sunlight spilling onto the plush carpet. The bed with its embroidered silk sheets looked untouched. For a brief moment, a sense of relief flickered in her chest. Maybe they were already awakened downstairs, maybe. She pushed the door open and froze. Her parents lay in bed side by side, just as they had every night before. But something was wrong. They were too still. Lily took a small, hesitant step forward. "Mom?" Her voice came out softer than she intended. They didn't stir. A strange, sharp coldness gripped her spine. "Dad?" Still nothing. Her feet carried her forward before her mind could catch up, closing the distance between them. She reached out with trembling fingers, brushing against her mother's arm. Cold. Not the kind of coolness that came from a chilly morning, but something deeper, unnatural. Her breath hitched. She pressed her hand against her mother's shoulder, gave a small shake. "Mom, wake up." Nothing. The unease that had been curling in her stomach twisted into full-blown panic. Her chest tightened as she reached for her father's hand, her fingers pressing into unmoving flesh. Too cold, too still. A terrible realization crashed over her like a tidal wave. They weren't asleep. They weren't waking up. The walls of the room blurred as panic exploded inside her. Her throat tightened, her lungs refusing to pull in enough air. No, this wasn't real. This couldn't be real. And then, before she could stop it, the scream tore from her throat. "Mom! Dad!" The sound shattered through the house, slicing through the suffocating silence. The crash of hurried footsteps pounded against the marble floor. Moments later, the door was thrown open, and Margaret, the housekeeper, burst inside. Her eyes darted to Lily, then to the bed, and the color drained from her face. She stumbled back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. Lily turned to her, eyes wide, wild with desperation. "Something's wrong," she gasped. "They won't wake up." Margaret didn't answer. She didn't have to. The horror in her expression said enough. The Monroe estate no longer felt like home. Lily sat on the velvet couch in the grand parlor, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white from the pressure. The room was too quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't belong in a house that had once been filled with warmth, laughter, and music. The fire in the grand stone hearth had been left to smolder, its embers barely flickering. Even the light pouring through the tall bay windows felt different, colder, emptier. Margaret, the housekeeper, stood a few feet away, her presence steady but tense, her hands clasped tightly in front of her apron. She had barely left Lily's side since the morning, hovering nearby as if afraid that if she looked away for too long, the girl might vanish altogether. Lily felt numb. Hours had passed since they had taken her parents away, since the coroner had spoken in hushed clinical tones about cardiac arrest and unfortunate coincidences. None of it made sense. Two healthy people didn't just die in their sleep like that. But every time she tried to ask why, she was met with nothing but pitying looks and empty reassurances. She hated it. A sharp knock at the door made her flinch. Margaret straightened, exchanging a wary glance with Lily before moving toward the entrance. The heavy front door creaked open, and the sound of measured footsteps echoed through the marble hallway. Mr. Townsend, the Monroe family attorney, entered the room. He was a tall man with silver-threaded hair and a neatly pressed suit, his expression carefully composed. He carried a thick leather briefcase in one hand, his posture stiff as if the weight of the papers inside bore some unspoken burden. "Lily," he said, his voice smooth but distant, like someone rehearsing condolences rather than offering them. "I'm so very sorry for your loss." Lily didn't answer. She stared at the briefcase instead, watching as he set it down on the mahogany coffee table and unlatched it with precise, deliberate movements. "Your parents," Townsend continued, flipping open a file, "were very thorough in their estate planning. They ensured that all of their affairs were in order so that you would be taken care of." Lily's chest tightened. Taken care of? She didn't want affairs in order. She wanted her mother's voice calling her down for breakfast. She wanted her father's warm chuckle as he told one of his terrible jokes. She wanted things to go back to how they were. Townsend pulled out a thick envelope, his fingers gliding over the embossed Monroe family seal. He set it in front of her, his gaze unreadable. "Everything they had, this house, the businesses, the wealth, it's all yours." Lily blinked, feeling a strange weight settle in her stomach. All hers? The words didn't fit. It felt wrong, like trying to wear a coat 10 sizes too big. She swallowed. "But I'm only 12. Townsend gave a slight nod, as if he had been expecting the question. "Yes, and legally you cannot manage the estate until you come of age." He paused, then carefully added, "Until then, a guardian has been appointed to oversee everything on your behalf." Lily's fingers dug into the fabric of her dress. A guardian. She already knew who it was before he said it. "Evelyn Monroe," Townsend announced, glancing at the documents as if confirming it in writing. "Your father's sister. The court has granted her full custody until your 18th birthday." A chill ran down Lily's spine. She looked up, her pulse quickening as her eyes darted toward the doorway. And there, standing just at the threshold, was Evelyn. She wore black, her dress elegant but severe, her dark hair swept back into a neat chignon. She held a silk handkerchief in one hand, dabbing at her eyes as if she had spent the morning crying. But her expression, when she turned toward Lily, was anything but grief-stricken. Her lips curved into a soft, carefully practiced smile. "Oh, my poor sweet girl," Evelyn murmured, stepping forward. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, measured and deliberate. She lowered herself onto the couch beside Lily, resting a hand on the girl's shoulder. The pressure was just a little too firm. "I know this is difficult," she said, her voice laced with false warmth. "But don't you worry, dear. I'll take care of everything." Lily sat frozen beneath her touch, her skin crawling. Townsend gave a small nod, oblivious to the tension in the air. "The estate's assets will be handled under Evelyn's guardianship until you turn 18. Everything will remain in trust until that time." Lily forced herself to swallow the lump forming in her throat. Until she was 18. 6 whole years. 6 years with Evelyn controlling everything. Evelyn squeezed her shoulder gently. Too gently. Too rehearsed. "Everything will be just fine," she whispered. Lily didn't believe her. Townsend cleared his throat, oblivious to the moment passing between them. "That concludes the legal matters for today. If you need anything, Lily, please don't hesitate to reach out to my office." He stood, gathering his files with the same mechanical precision as before. Lily barely heard him. She felt Evelyn's fingers lift from her shoulder as the attorney closed his briefcase and prepared to leave. Then, as soon as the front door clicked shut behind him, the air in the room shifted. The warmth disappeared from Evelyn's expression in an instant. Her soft smile hardened into something sharp, something cold. She exhaled slowly, smoothing the front of her dress before finally looking down at Lily with a gaze devoid of any remaining pretense. "You really are quite lucky," she murmured, tilting her head as if studying her. Lily felt her throat tighten. Evelyn leaned in just slightly, her voice dropping low. "Everything you have," she said, her words slow and deliberate, "should have been mine." Lily's hands curled into fists. Evelyn's lips twitched, something almost amused flickering behind her dark eyes. "But don't worry," she continued smoothly, standing to her full height. "I'll fix that." A shiver crept down Lily's spine. For the first time that day, true fear settled in her bones. The house had never felt this empty. The warm, lively estate that had once been filled with music and laughter had become a hollow shell. Gone were the soft murmurs of servants preparing for the day, the gentle hum of the radio playing her father's favorite jazz, the rhythmic clicking of her mother's heels as she moved through the halls. Now only shadows remained. Lily lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding against the unbearable silence. She had barely touched her dinner. She couldn't eat under Evelyn's watchful gaze. The way her aunt's eyes lingered on her, just a little too long, like a hunter studying its prey. Sleep wouldn't come. She turned onto her side, curling into herself beneath the heavy blankets. But the weight of exhaustion couldn't drown out the gnawing unease coiling in her stomach. Something was wrong. She knew it in her bones. Sliding out from under the covers, she carefully placed her feet on the floor, wincing as the wooden planks creaked beneath her weight. She hesitated, holding her breath, listening. Nothing. The house was dark, the air thick and unmoving. Pulling on her robe, she slipped out of the room, the long, winding hall stretching before her in eerie stillness. The only light came from the faint glow of the moon filtering through the tall windows, casting silver streaks across the marble floors. She moved cautiously, her fingers trailing along the smooth banister as she descended the grand staircase. Then she heard it. Voices, muffled, low, coming from down the hall. Lily froze, her pulse quickening. The study. She knew that room well. It had been her father's sanctuary, a place where she had spent countless afternoons curled up in the leather chair by the fireplace, listening to him explain things she was still too young to understand. He had always left the door open just a crack, just enough for her to peek in when she wanted to. But tonight the door was shut, and inside Evelyn was speaking in a voice that made Lily's skin prickle. "She's just a child. She doesn't deserve that fortune." Lily's breath caught in her throat. She took a step closer, pressing herself against the wall beside the door. She could hear the faint clink of glass, a drink being set down, followed by the rustle of papers. A second voice responded, lower, unfamiliar. A man. What do you want us to do? Lily's fingers curled into the fabric of her robe, her entire body tensing. There was a pause and then Evelyn's voice, calm, controlled, chilling. By morning, she's gone. The world tilted. Lily clamped a hand over her mouth, choking down the gasp, threatening to escape. A cold sweat broke across her skin. She had known Evelyn was cruel. She had seen the shift in her demeanor the moment the lawyer had left. But this was something else. This was a death sentence. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Her mind screamed at her to run, to do something, anything. But her legs felt rooted to the floor. The sound of Evelyn's chair scraping against the hardwood snapped her out of her daze. Footsteps, coming toward the door. Lily bolted. She ran back through the hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs. She took the stairs two at a time, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She didn't stop until she was back in her room, the door locked behind her. Her hands trembled as she pressed her back against the wood, listening, waiting. The house was silent once more. But Lily knew she wouldn't be alive to see the sunrise if she stayed. Lily pressed her back against the bedroom door, her breaths coming in shallow, uneven gasps. Her hands were ice cold, her fingers trembling as she clutched the fabric of her nightgown. The words she had heard downstairs rang in her ears like a death sentence. By morning, she's gone. Her pulse pounded so hard it drowned out every other sound. They were coming for her. Maybe not this very second, but soon, before sunrise. She had no doubt Evelyn would make good on her promise. Her mind raced. Was there someone she could turn to? Mr. Townsend? No, he had left hours ago. And even if she found a way to reach him, what proof did she have? No one would believe a 12-year-old over Evelyn Monroe. Margaret. Lily's breath hitched. Margaret had always been kind to her, had always treated her with more warmth than just a housekeeper should. Would she help? Could she? But what if Evelyn got to her first? What if she had already warned the staff not to interfere? There was no time to find out. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to force the panic down, trying to think. She could hear her mother's voice, soft but firm, the way it had always been when she was trying to teach Lily something important. If something feels wrong, trust your instincts. And every fiber of Lily's being screamed that if she stayed in this house tonight, she would not wake up in the morning. She had to go. Her hands shook as she grabbed a small satchel from the closet, throwing it onto the bed. She moved quickly, her breath shallow and her fingers fumbling as she gathered whatever she could. Her father's pocket watch, the only piece of him she had left. She hesitated for only a moment before tucking it deep into the bag. Her mother's silk scarf, the scent of lavender still lingered in the delicate fabric, faint but unmistakable. She pressed it to her cheek for just a second, fighting back the grief that threatened to swallow her whole. A photograph, the three of them at the beach last summer, the sun golden in the background, her father's arms wrapped around both her and her mother, all of them laughing. It had been a perfect day, one of the last perfect days. She shoved it into the bag and yanked the drawstrings tight. A sharp creak from somewhere in the house made her freeze. She held her breath, listening. Footsteps, slow, measured, moving down the hall. Lily's stomach twisted. They were checking to see if she was asleep. If she hesitated any longer, she'd never get the chance to leave. She turned to the window. The mansion stretched behind her like a dark silhouette against the night sky. Its towering shape once a place of comfort, now a prison. Her fingers fumbled with the lock, her heart hammering so hard she was sure they would hear it. Click. The window eased open with a quiet groan. A gust of cold air hit her face, shocking her system, making the moment feel terrifyingly real. She climbed onto the ledge, her knees weak beneath her. Then without looking back, she leapt. The ground met her hard, sending a jolt through her legs, but she didn't stop. She forced herself forward, her feet pounding against the earth, the wind whipping against her skin. She ran, away from the only home she had ever known, away from the life that had been stolen from her, into the night where only the unknown waited. The night swallowed her whole. Lily ran until her lungs burned, until the grand silhouette of the Monroe estate disappeared behind her. The uneven ground beneath her feet was damp and cold, littered with twigs and loose gravel that bit into her bare soles. She didn't stop. She couldn't. The wind howled through the trees, whipping at her hair, chilling her to the bone. She had no idea where she was going, only that she had to get as far away as possible. Away from Evelyn, away from the house that had once been her home, but had become her prison. By the time she reached the town's outskirts, the first hints of dawn were creeping along the horizon, casting a pale, ghostly light over the quiet streets. Lily stumbled onto the cracked pavement, her legs trembling beneath her, exhaustion creeping in like a slow-moving poison. She had made it out, but she was alone. The world outside was nothing like the safety of her home. It was harsh, indifferent. The cold settled into her bones, deeper than before, now that she had no walls to protect her. She pulled her mother's silk scarf tighter around her shoulders, as if that small comfort could keep her warm. It didn't. The streets were mostly empty at this hour, save for the occasional milkman making his rounds, the distant clatter of shopkeepers preparing for the morning rush. Lily kept walking, hugging herself against the biting wind. Her stomach twisted with hunger. It had been nearly a full day since she had last eaten, but the shock, the fear, the sheer terror of what had happened had kept the hunger at bay. Now it gnawed at her, relentless and cruel. She passed a bakery, the scent of fresh bread wafting through the air, warm and rich, making her mouth water. Her feet slowed against her will. She imagined stepping inside, the bell jingling above the door, the baker turning with a kind smile, handing her a warm roll. No, that world was gone. That shop was for people with money, for those who had a home to return to. It wasn't meant for a little girl wandering the streets, carrying only a pocket watch and a few meager belongings. She pulled herself away, swallowing hard. Further down the street, she caught sight of a woman stepping out of a department store, dressed in an elegant wool coat, her gloved hands clutching a shopping bag. Lily hesitated. Maybe if she explained. Maybe if she told the truth. If she said she had nowhere else to go, someone would take pity on her. She took a cautious step forward. "Excuse me, ma'am." The woman barely looked at her. Her gaze flicked over Lily's disheveled appearance, the dirt smudged on her face, the way her arms clutched at herself for warmth. Her lip curled in disgust. "Another runaway?" she muttered, shaking her head before turning on her heel and walking away, as if Lily didn't exist. The words stung, not just the rejection, but the dismissal, the ease with which the woman had looked right through her. Lily's hands balled into fists. She had been Lily Monroe. People had smiled at her when she walked down the street, had waved at her father, had treated her with kindness, with warmth. Now she was no one. The realization settled deep in her chest, heavier than the hunger, heavier than the cold. She kept walking, further into the city, where the streets grew busier, where people bustled past her with their own lives, their own concerns. No one looked at her, no one saw her. Her stomach twisted again, a sharp pang that nearly doubled her over. She needed to eat. The thought alone filled her with shame. She had never been hungry before, never had to wonder where her next meal would come from, but hunger didn't care about pride. She stopped near the back of a diner, the scent of grease and frying bacon heavy in the air. Near the back entrance, a metal trash bin sat open, lined with crumpled paper bags, discarded food. Lily's body moved before her mind could stop her. Her fingers shook as she reached inside, pushing past the garbage, the half-eaten scraps, the stale crusts. Her face burned with humiliation, but she was too hungry to stop. Her fingers closed around a half-eaten roll, torn but still soft. She hesitated only for a moment before shoving it into her mouth, her stomach aching with relief as she swallowed. The shame burned hotter than the cold, but it didn't matter. She had to survive. The morning air was damp with the lingering chill of the previous night, and the sky hung heavy with low gray clouds, as if the heavens themselves were mourning. Lily stood at the edge of the cemetery, half hidden behind a rusting iron gate, her breath shallow, her pulse a steady drumbeat in her ears. She hadn't meant to come here. She had been wandering the streets aimless, exhausted, the weight of hunger and grief pressing against her ribs when she heard them, the hushed voices of two women passing by. Such a tragedy. The funeral is today. I still can't believe they're gone. The Monroes were so full of life. Lily had stopped walking. Everything else around her faded into silence. Her parents' funeral. She had no invitation, no place among the mourners, but that didn't matter. She had to be there. Now, standing in the shadow of an ancient oak tree at the edge of the cemetery, she peered out from behind its thick trunk, watching as a small crowd gathered around two freshly dug graves. Black-clad figures stood in clusters, their faces somber, some dabbing at their eyes with handkerchiefs. She recognized a few of them, business associates of her father, women who had once gushed over her mother's elegant fashion at charity galas. They spoke in hushed voices, their heads bowed. A priest stood at the head of the graves, speaking words Lily couldn't fully make out over the roaring in her ears. But she caught fragments. Cherished lives. Taken too soon. May they find peace. She clenched her fingers into the bark of the tree, nails digging deep, grounding herself. She should be there, standing beside them, saying goodbye properly. Instead, she was hidden in the shadows like she didn't belong. Someone stepped forward, a single red rose in hand, and gently laid it on her mother's grave. Another followed, then another. A dozen roses, white lilies, wreaths of soft petals covering the freshly turned earth. Lily's throat tightened. She had nothing to give. No flowers, no words, only her presence, unseen, unheard. One by one, the mourners turned and left. Some lingered, whispering amongst themselves before disappearing beyond the cemetery gates. Then silence. Lily's legs felt stiff as she stepped forward, her heartbeat hammering against her ribs. The graves loomed before her, two marble headstones carved with names that should never have been etched in stone so soon. Daniel Monroe, Margaret Monroe. The sight of them knocked the breath from her lungs. Her fingers trembled as she reached out, brushing the cool surface of the letters. This was real. They weren't coming back. Her knees buckled and she sank to the damp earth, her fingers tracing the engravings, as if memorizing them would somehow bring her closer to them. I remember when Dad danced with me in the living room, she whispered, her voice raw, fragile. When Mom told me I was her little star. The memories swelled, unbidden. The way her father had twirled her through the kitchen just nights ago, his laughter deep and rich, the scent of her mother's lavender perfume as she kissed her goodnight, the way they had made her feel safe, always. Tears slipped down her cheeks, falling onto the stone. I don't know how to live without you. She bowed her head, the weight of the words pressing down on her, sinking into her bones. For the first time since she had fled the house, the grief fully took hold. A sob wrenched from her throat, shaking her small frame. She curled her arms around herself, as if trying to hold together the pieces of her shattered world. The wind stirred, carrying with it the scent of rain, the rustling of leaves. Lily closed her eyes, wishing, just for a moment, that she could hear their voices one last time. The wind had shifted. Lily felt it before she heard it. The air, once cool and heavy with the scent of damp earth, now carried something else. A low, distant vibration that sent an icy prickle down her spine. Then the sound came, a low, guttural rumble of an engine. Her stomach clenched. She lifted her head from the cold gravestone, her tears still fresh on her cheeks. Her body curled against the earth as if clinging to the last remnants of her parents. But the moment that sound reached her ears, all grief was swallowed by a single, primal instinct. Run. Her pulse hammered as she forced herself onto shaky legs. The cemetery was nearly empty, the sky above turning a deeper shade of gray as dusk crept in. She darted toward the massive oak tree where she had been hiding, pressing herself against the rough bark, forcing her breath to slow. The rumbling grew louder. Then it stopped. A car door creaked open, then another. Footsteps crunched against the gravel path. Measured, confident, unrushed. Lily barely dared to breathe. Then, a voice, smooth, controlled, poisonous. Found you. A chill laced its way down Lily's spine. Evelyn. Lily risked a glance from behind the tree. There she was, standing just outside a sleek black car, her dark coat wrapped around her like a shroud, her expression unreadable. But it was her eyes that made Lily's stomach twist. Cold, calculating. And beside her, flanking her like shadows, were two men. Tall, broad, their suits crisp, but their stance unmistakably predatory. Lily didn't think. She moved. She tore away from the tree, feet pounding against the wet ground as she sprinted toward the back of the cemetery. Her heart slammed against her ribs, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had to get away. A voice, low and sharp, cut through the air. "Get her!" Then, thundering footsteps behind her. Lily pushed herself harder, her legs burning with the effort. Almost there. Almost. A hand clamped onto her arm. She screamed, "No! Let me go!" She twisted, kicked, fought with every ounce of strength left in her. Her small fist swung wildly, catching an arm, a chest, but they were too strong. Another set of hands seized her waist, yanking her backward. She thrashed violently, her vision blurring with panic. "Stop! Please!" She clawed at the fingers, digging into her arms, her breath sharp and frantic. The scent of stale cologne and sweat filled her nose. "Enough!" The word was spoken so calmly that it froze her more than the hands restraining her. Evelyn stepped forward, her heels clicking against the damp ground. She crouched slightly, just enough to bring her gaze level with Lily's. That smile, cold, almost amused, as if Lily's struggle had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "That was quite the little chase," Evelyn mused, brushing an invisible speck of dust from her coat. "But it ends here." Lily's breath came in quick, desperate bursts. She shook her head, tried to yank free, but the grip on her only tightened. Evelyn sighed, tilting her head. "You always were a stubborn one." Lily's body trembled. She had escaped once. She wouldn't be lucky twice. Then Evelyn nodded. A sharp sting filled Lily's nose. A cloth, pressed against her mouth. The scent was sickly sweet, chemical, suffocating. She bucked, her mind screaming at her to fight, to stay awake. But the world tilted. The edges of her vision blurred. Darkness creeping in, swallowing the sky. The gravestones, the cruel, victorious gleam in Evelyn's eyes. Then, nothing. The illusion shattered in an instant. A gust of wind cut through the trees, sharp and unrelenting, sending a violent shiver down Lily's spine. The warmth of her memory, her father's laughter, her mother's gentle touch, vanished like smoke in the night. She was back in the cold, back in the dark, back in a place where no one was coming to save her. Lily sucked in a breath, forcing her shoulders to square against the chill. She couldn't afford to lose herself in memories. Not here, not now. Her body ached, her ribs burning from the rough landing. Her thin clothes clung to her skin, damp from the forest floor, offering little protection against the creeping cold. Everything hurt, but pain meant she was alive. And as long as she was alive, Evelyn hadn't won. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself onto her hands and knees. The damp earth was uneven beneath her palms, littered with jagged twigs and sharp stones that bit into her skin. She pushed past it, pressing her foot against a tree root to steady herself as she forced her trembling legs to stand. The night around her was vast, endless. The trees stretched high and merciless, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky, cutting off any sign of the world beyond this forsaken place. How far had they taken her? How many miles separated her from civilization? From help? She didn't know. But what she did know was that Evelyn hadn't left her here by accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was a grave. Lily swallowed the fear clawing at her throat. She couldn't stay here. She had to move, had to find shelter, had to keep going. She turned in slow, deliberate circles, scanning the darkness, searching for anything, any landmark, any sign of a road. But all she saw was an endless sea of trees, stretching in every direction. And then, a sound, a rustling in the underbrush. Lily froze. Her pulse pounded as she strained to listen. The wind? An animal? Or something worse? Another rustle, closer this time. Her breath hitched. She wasn't alone. The realization hit like ice down her spine. Something was watching her. Lily didn't wait to find out what. She turned on her heel and ran. The night stretched endlessly, swallowing Lily whole. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs trembled beneath her. The damp, uneven ground caught at her feet, threatening to pull her down with every desperate step. She didn't stop. She couldn't. She had no plan, no sense of direction, only the sheer, unrelenting need to survive. The darkness was suffocating. The towering trees pressed in around her, their twisted limbs casting eerie shadows in the moonlight. Every rustle, every snap of a twig sent jolts of terror through her veins. She was being hunted, if not by Evelyn's men, then by the forest itself. But she wouldn't let it win. Not the fear, not the hunger, not the cold. She slowed, gasping for air, her body slick with sweat despite the frigid night. Her throat burned, parched and raw, her stomach twisting with a deep, gnawing emptiness. She hadn't eaten since. She didn't even know when. A sound reached her ears, faint but steady. Water. Lily followed it, weaving through the trees until she stumbled upon a narrow stream, its surface reflecting the slivers of moonlight that cut through the dense canopy. Relief crashed over her. She fell to her knees at the edge, scooping handfuls of the cold liquid to her cracked lips. The first sip was sharp, metallic, but it didn't matter. It was water. It filled her mouth, eased the ache in her throat. She drank greedily, tilting her head down to take more. Minutes later, she doubled over, gagging. Pain ripped through her stomach, a violent, twisting cramp that stole the breath from her lungs. Then came the vomiting. She gasped between heaves, pressing her forehead to the cold earth. The water, it wasn't clean. A sob built in her chest, but she forced it down. Crying wouldn't help. Nothing would help. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, her body trembling as the weakness threatened to pull her under. But she wouldn't let it. She pushed herself up, staggering to her feet. She needed food. Hours passed as she moved deeper into the forest, searching for anything edible. The hunger clawed at her ribs, a cruel, unrelenting monster. Then she saw them, small, dark berries clustered along a low bush. She hesitated. She knew enough to be cautious. Some berries could kill you in a matter of hours. But what choice did she have? Her fingers trembled as she plucked one and pressed it to her lips. She swallowed. Bitterness coated her tongue, but she forced herself to chew, praying she hadn't just signed her own death sentence. The sky, once clear, began to shift. The air grew heavy, charged with something unnatural. A storm. Thunder rumbled in the distance. A low, ominous growl. The wind picked up, rustling the trees, whispering warnings through the branches. The storm was coming fast. Lily had to find shelter. She searched frantically, her heart slamming against her ribs as the first raindrops splattered against her skin. The trees above offered little protection. Then in the distance, a fallen tree, its massive trunk forming a natural alcove against the hillside. She ran. The moment she reached it, the sky split open. Lightning tore through the heavens, illuminating the world in a brilliant, blinding flash. Then came the rain, a merciless downpour, drenching her within seconds. She pressed herself against the rough bark, curling into the small space beneath the fallen tree. The cold burrowed into her bones, deep and unforgiving. Her teeth chattered violently, her fingers stiff with numbness. She wouldn't last the night like this. She needed fire. Through sheer determination, she gathered twigs, dry leaves, anything that might burn. Her hands were stiff, her movements clumsy, but she refused to stop. She struck stones together, over and over, until her fingers bled, until her breath was ragged. Then, a spark, a tiny ember, flickering against the darkness. Lily shielded it with trembling hands, feeding it carefully, coaxing life from the smallest flame. It caught. The fire burned low but steady, its warmth creeping into her frozen limbs. For the first time since she had woken in this nightmare, Lily felt something other than fear. She felt defiance. Evelyn had left her here to die. The forest had tried to break her, but she was still here. Lily pulled a sturdy branch from the wreckage of the fallen tree. She sharpened one end against a rock, shaping it into something dangerous. A weapon, a promise. She stared into the fire, her jaw tightening. I will not die here. The storm raged on around her, but inside a different fire had begun to burn. The storm had passed, but the forest was still soaked in its aftermath. Lily stepped carefully over the damp undergrowth, her bare feet sinking into the mud. The fire she had built had kept her alive through the night, but dawn brought new dangers. She couldn't stay in the open. The forest felt endless, stretching in every direction, but she knew she had to move. Find food, find real shelter. Her sharpened branch, a crude but necessary weapon, was clutched tightly in her grip as she moved deeper into the woods. The wind had died down, but the trees still groaned under the weight of the storm's fury, rainwater dripping from their leaves, collecting in heavy beads before falling to the forest floor. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, thick and heavy with the scent of something old, something forgotten. Then through the tangled mess of vines and fallen branches, she saw it, a cabin. Lily froze. It was small, barely more than a shack, its wooden walls weathered and darkened with age. Ivy had crept over it, climbing the sides like greedy fingers, nearly swallowing the structure whole. The windows were clouded with dirt, the door slightly ajar, swaying ever so slightly in the breeze. Her heart pounded. Who had lived here? And more importantly, was it still occupied? She gripped her makeshift spear tighter as she crept forward. Every step felt like a risk. The wooden porch groaned under her weight as she tested it, half expecting the whole thing to collapse beneath her. Silence. She nudged the door open with the end of her branch. The hinges let out a weak groan, but no movement came from inside. Empty. Lily exhaled, relief but only for a moment. The cabin smelled of dust and mildew, the air thick with the scent of time itself. Sunlight leaked through the slats in the roof, illuminating floating specks of dust. A wooden table sat in the corner, warped from moisture, and a stone fireplace stood against the far wall, long dead and choked with leaves. It was abandoned. She stepped inside, careful of the loose floorboards beneath her. The room was small, but it was shelter. It was safe. For the first time since she had been thrown into this nightmare, she let her guard drop, just for a moment. She ran her fingers along the wooden table, brushing off years of dust, her mind trying to make sense of why this place felt familiar. Then she saw it, carved into the wood, just barely visible beneath the grime and age, a crest, a symbol she had seen before. Her breath caught in her throat. She reached out, brushing away more dirt, tracing the familiar design with her fingertips. The Monroe family crest. A rush of unease crawled up her spine. What was this doing here? She stepped back, scanning the cabin again, this time with new eyes. This wasn't just an old shelter. It was connected to her family. The floor creaked beneath her. Lily stilled. Then slowly she lowered herself to the ground, running her hands along the warped planks. Something felt off. She pressed her palms against the wood, testing its give. Hollow. Her pulse quickened. She dug her fingers into the edges, prying at the loose board. The damp wood resisted at first, but with one sharp pull, it gave way, revealing a hidden space beneath. A chest. Small, wooden, worn with age but unmistakably deliberate. Her breath came in short bursts as she reached inside, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the surface. The lid was heavy, sealed tight from years of neglect. She gritted her teeth and pulled. It groaned open, and inside, gold. Not coins, not jewelry, but intricately crafted relics. Figurines, small statues, each piece carved with the same crest she had traced only moments ago. Her chest tightened. Was this meant for me? Her fingers hovered over the treasures, the weight of history pressing down on her. Someone had hidden this, someone in her family. But why? And what did it mean for her now? Lily sat in the dim light of the cabin, the chest of relics before her, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on the golden eagle she had pulled from inside. It didn't feel real. A moment ago, she had nothing, not even hope. Now in her hands lay a legacy, a secret hidden for generations, waiting for her to find it. She didn't know who had placed it there, Maybe her father. Maybe his father before him. But she knew, deep in her bones, that it had been meant for her. Not Evelyn. Not the greedy hands that had tried to erase her existence. Heron for hours she sat in silence, running her hands over each artifact, feeling the weight of them, the weight of her name, her history. This wasn't just treasure, it was power. And power, she knew, was the only thing that could bring her justice. But first she had to survive long enough to use it. The years that followed were ruthless. She had thought she was strong before. She was wrong. Surviving the forest had been one thing. Preparing for the world beyond it was another. Lily studied every inch of the artifacts, trying to understand their origins, their worth. She spent months repairing the abandoned cabin, reinforcing its walls, learning to store food, to make weapons, to fight. She couldn't just survive anymore. She had to be unstoppable. She taught herself patience, learned how to track animals, how to disappear when hunters came too close. She fashioned traps, sharpened her spear, strengthened her body, and every night she stared at the chest, whispering the same vow. This will not be wasted. The idea came slowly at first, creeping into her mind with each passing day. The realization that she couldn't stay here forever. She had to return, not as a lost girl begging for help, but as someone ready to reclaim what was hers. It took nearly a year to plan her escape. She scouted the river, mapping its currents, gathering the strongest wood she could find. She built the raft with her own hands, layering vines, testing its weight. She had no room for failure, because she wouldn't get another chance. The river stretched endlessly before her, winding like a silver serpent through the dense wilderness. Lily knelt on the raft she had spent weeks building, her hands steady as she pushed off from the muddy bank. The wooden logs, bound tightly with thick vines, creaked beneath her weight, but they held strong. She had learned to trust her own work. The current took her, slow at first, then faster as the river pulled her away from the forest that had been her home and her prison for the last 2 years. She didn't look back. She had survived where she wasn't meant to. The girl Evelyn had left for dead was gone, replaced by someone stronger, sharper, unbreakable. The wind swept through her tangled hair as she guided the raft down the river, the town growing closer with every passing hour. 2 years. 2 years of fighting, of enduring, of learning. 2 years of waiting for this moment. The moment she would take back everything Evelyn had stolen, the moment she would make her pay. The town appeared in the distance, its rooftops hazy in the afternoon light. The sight of it sent a jolt through Lily's chest. Not fear, not hesitation, but purpose. She had been invisible once, not anymore. When she finally set foot on solid ground, she felt the weight of eyes on her. People stared as she walked through the bustling market, her clothes worn, her body lean and hardened from years in the wild. They whispered, "Who was this girl stepping out of the past like a ghost?" She ignored them. She had only one destination. Mr. Henshaw's antique shop stood at the far end of the street, its dusty window filled with relics of forgotten eras. Lily pushed open the heavy wooden door, the bell above jingling softly. A man, gray-haired, spectacled, looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help?" His voice caught in his throat the moment he saw what she carried. Lily set the chest onto the counter and unlatched it with deliberate care. The lid creaked open, revealing the golden relics, intricate, breathtaking, glowing under the dim shop lights. Mr. Henshaw sucked in a sharp breath, his fingers hovering over the treasures, his expression shifting from curiosity to shock. Where did you find these?" he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily met his gaze, her own steady, unwavering. "They belong to my family." His eyes flicked back to the artifacts, realization dawning. He adjusted his glasses, his hands shaking slightly as he carefully lifted one of the statues, a golden eagle, its wings spread wide. "These are priceless," he breathed. This is history." Lily didn't blink. "I know." The auction was arranged swiftly. News spread like wildfire. A lost collection of Monroe family heirlooms, unearthed after decades, shrouded in mystery. Wealthy collectors, historians, and reporters all gathered in a grand hall, eager to witness the event. The bidding war was ruthless. One relic after another, the numbers soared higher and higher. Millions. Lily watched from the shadows, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. People gawked at the fortune she had unearthed, whispering about the girl who had returned from nowhere with a treasure trove in her hands. Lily didn't celebrate when the final gavel struck at the auction, sealing the sale of her family's lost relics. The room erupted in applause. Million-dollar bids exchanged between collectors like casual conversation, but she remained still. The weight of wealth meant nothing to her. She hadn't come back for fortune. She had come back for justice. With the money secured, she wasted no time. Within days, she sought out the most discreet and ruthless investigators she could find, people who didn't ask questions, only delivered results. She gave them one name, Evelyn Monroe, and then she waited. Weeks passed in agonizing slowness, but with each day, the picture became clearer. Evelyn hadn't just stolen an inheritance. She had orchestrated an empire of deception, one carefully woven over years. The documents Evelyn had forged after her parents' deaths were only the beginning. Bank transfers, hidden accounts, bribes to doctors and officials, all of it pointed to something far darker. The poison in her parents' system hadn't been a coincidence. It hadn't been a tragic, unexplained death. It had been planned, cold, methodical. A crime executed so flawlessly that, without Lily's return, it might have never been questioned. Lily pored over every report, every piece of evidence, her hands gripping the pages so tightly they nearly tore. The autopsy had been falsified, the doctors had been paid off, and Evelyn had ensured there was no one left to stand in her way, except Lily. She felt no fear now, only certainty. With the evidence stacked against Evelyn, she took the final step. She handed it all over to the authorities. And then she waited for the storm to come. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Rows of spectators filled every available seat, their hushed whispers rippling through the air like an oncoming storm. The press had gathered in full force, journalists with notebooks poised, cameras flashing in rapid succession, eager to capture every moment of what had become the trial of the decade. At the front of the courtroom, prosecutors sat with stacks of damning evidence, forged documents, financial manipulations, autopsy reports confirming the presence of poison. The truth once buried beneath Evelyn Monroe's carefully crafted lies had been unearthed piece by piece. And at the center of it all, sitting poised and composed, was Lily. No longer the helpless girl abandoned in the woods, no longer the child Evelyn had sought to erase. She was here, alive, powerful, and she was about to watch justice be served. The heavy doors at the back of the courtroom swung open, and Evelyn Monroe entered. Dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit, her chin lifted high, she strode in with the same confidence she had always worn, as if the world still bent to her will. She barely spared a glance at the prosecutors, at the journalists who had already begun scribbling notes about her carefully controlled expression. Then she saw Lily, and the mask cracked. For the briefest moment, her step faltered. Her eyes widened just slightly, her breath hitching, an involuntary reaction before she quickly masked it. But Lily saw. Evelyn had spent years convincing herself that Lily was gone, that she had won, that no one would ever be able to challenge her control over the Monroe fortune. Yet now here she was, not just alive, but standing as her accuser. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. Slowly, she took her seat at the defense table, her fingers curling against the polished wood. The bailiff called the court to order, and silence swept through the room. Then the judge entered, an imposing man with sharp eyes and a voice that commanded absolute authority. He wasted no time. "Evelyn Monroe," he began, his voice ringing through the chamber. "You stand accused of conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder, and the calculated poisoning of Daniel and Margaret Monroe." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Evelyn sat rigid, her jaw tightening. She knew what was coming. The prosecution laid out every piece of damning evidence. The falsified medical reports, the payments to corrupt doctors, the hidden accounts showing years of scheming to steal the Monroe fortune. The final blow came when a forensic expert confirmed what had been suspected all along. Her parents' tea had been laced with poison, carefully administered over time. It had never been a coincidence. It had never been fate. It had been murder. Evelyn's attorneys argued. They tried to poke holes in the investigation, to dismiss the evidence as circumstantial, but it was useless. The truth was undeniable. And then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Lily stood, all eyes turned to her as she approached the witness stand. She moved with quiet strength, the years of suffering, survival, and determination woven into every step. She took her oath, sat down, faced Evelyn directly, and she spoke. She told the courtroom everything. How Evelyn had stolen her parents from her, how she had signed a child's death sentence and left her to rot in the wilderness, how she had fought, survived, and come back for this very moment. Every word was steady, precise, powerful. Evelyn didn't move. She didn't speak. She just sat there, her hands clenched so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The jury took only 2 hours to reach a verdict. The silence was deafening as everyone waited for the judge to deliver his final ruling. He looked directly at Evelyn, his expression one of utter condemnation. "Evelyn Monroe," he declared, his voice booming through the courtroom, "you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." The room erupted. Journalists scrambled to capture the moment. Spectators gasped, whispered, murmured their approval. Evelyn, for the first time in her life, she had lost. Her carefully composed mask shattered as the bailiffs moved toward her. She opened her mouth as if to argue, as if she could still manipulate her way out of this. But there was nothing left to manipulate. She had no power, no control, no future. As they placed handcuffs around her wrists, her gaze flickered back to Lily. Lily held her stare, her expression unreadable. But in her eyes, Evelyn saw it. Not hatred, not vengeance. Something far worse, indifference. Lily turned away before they dragged Evelyn from the courtroom. She didn't need to see the end. It was already over. The past did not define Lily Monroe. Not the betrayal, not the suffering, not the years lost to hunger, to fear, to fighting for every breath. She had been forged in survival, but she refused to let survival be her only story. With the fortune she reclaimed, Lily built something greater than vengeance. She created homes for children who had been abandoned like she once was. She provided food, education, and safety to those who had never known such things. She became the person she had needed all those years ago. One evening, as she left one of her shelters, she spotted a familiar figure standing at the edge of the street. A woman, clutching her purse tightly, her eyes darting with uncertainty. Lily knew her immediately. It was the same woman who had sneered at her years ago when she was starving on the streets. "Another runaway?" she had said back then, turning away as if Lily was nothing. Now that same woman stood before her, broken in a different way. No longer untouchable, no longer above misfortune. Lily could have walked away. She could have ignored her, let karma have its way. Instead, she reached out a hand. Because kindness is power. Because choosing to rise above the cruelty of others is the greatest victory. Lily had spent years fighting to survive. Now she was fighting for something more. Justice had been served, but justice alone didn't heal. Building something better did. Life tests us in ways we never expect. It breaks us, challenges us, pushes us past the limits we once believed unshakable. But resilience, courage, and truth will always win. What about you? Have you ever faced a challenge that forced you to grow, to fight, to rise stronger? Share your story. We'd love to hear it. And if Lily's journey inspired you, stay with us. There are more stories to tell, more lives to honor. Thank you for being part of this journey.